All right, welcome back to Schlide Into Sports, live on 103.1 FM on WVOP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, aka Schlide, and this just feels like a breath of fresh air just at the start of the episode. San Antonio beating out Oklahoma City in Game 7. That's obviously not all that we're going to talk about today, and normally on the show we talk about the rules and regulations and how they trickle down throughout college sports. This summer, we've been talking about NBA playoffs, NFL trade deadlines, a little bit of MLB, enhanced games, stuff like that, more summer sport stuff because primarily, like I said before, rules and regulations, but also other college sports as well. So, and it's the summer, so there's no college in the summer besides some of the breaking stories like the Brendan Sorsby story, which we're going to talk a little bit about that because there is a few new updates on that need to be talked about. So anyway, San Antonio, New York Knicks, that is the championship series. I think this will probably end up being one of the most watched championship series in the last 10 years. I think both these teams are insanely good. A lot of young players on both of these teams. When you look at the San Antonio Spurs, the average age on their entire roster is 25.06 years old, making them one of the youngest teams to ever reach a championship series. For their playoff core, so their 9-man playoff rotation, the average age for that is exactly 24 years old. And the starting lineup, so the starting 5, average age is almost 23 years old. It's just a little under 23 years old with 22 years, 346 days years old, which is the youngest in conference finals history, I think, in both the Eastern and Western Conference finals. So that's absolutely huge. But part of the reason why this series is a breath of fresh air, not just because Oklahoma City's not in it and, we don't have to hate watch and watch unethical basketball. And I've gotten into debates with people on TikTok about why Oklahoma City plays unethical basketball. And a part of the argument that people have against me is, oh, well, everybody in the NBA flops. But in last week's broadcast, I talked about how it wasn't just the flopping that makes Oklahoma City an unethical basketball organization, or at least their playing style being unethical. It's not the flopping, it's the facts that they jump into people after they fake their shots. So I explained it a little bit last week, so for any new listeners, I'm going to explain it again. Basically, what Oklahoma City does is they'll pump fake, get the defender to jump up into the air. The defender can't control where he's at in the air, so Oklahoma City jumps into the defender and does so while they're in a shooting motion to draw the foul, because you can't touch the shooter unless you're touching the ball. If you touch the ball, then that's fine, but you can't fall onto the shooter, you can't hit the shooter, none of that. So Oklahoma City found a loophole in that rule, and they were playing to that. I mean, that's a large part of the reason why a lot of people were upset about some of the games in the Western Conference Final, because Oklahoma City would win and they would pull off those antics and they wouldn't get called for it. Adam Silver, the commissioner, made an appearance on the Pat McAfee show, and Pat McAfee was asking him a little bit about the flopping and some of the other rules. There's this new rule, or I'm not necessarily sure if it's a rule, but it's more of a policy for the draft where I believe it's an anti-tanking policy or anti-tanking rule. And essentially, if you're in the bottom 3 spots overall in the season, like if you finished in the bottom 3 with the overall record, then you don't have as good of a chance as getting a number 1 spot or a number 1 draft spot. So I believe that is going to take place next year. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. I will say I'm not entirely optimistic for how that's going to work. I don't necessarily think that some teams try to tank. I mean, I think in the NFL that's going to be a pretty big controversy later on this year, possibly. But there are some teams in the NFL where they just are not at the same level as some of the other teams that they're competing against. And that's just, I mean, that's kind of the way it is with the NBA too. I mean, there's teams that are just not at the same level as like the Spurs or the Knicks or the Oklahoma City Thunder or Warriors or Warriors a little less so because they didn't make the playoffs this year, but like the Detroit Pistons this year, like there wasn't really a lot of teams that were on that same level. Or like there's teams further down the line that are just not on that level. Anyways, I think the anti-taking rule is probably going to end up putting those teams even further behind the other NBA teams, which kind of sucks for them, but hopefully that gets changed. For some reason, Adam Silver was introduced as the greatest commissioner in all of sports on Pat McAfee show, which I didn't quite understand that because I would argue against that, to be completely honest, because they do have flopping rules in place for the players where they receive fines or 1-game suspensions, 2-game suspensions, but we never ever see that enforced. And he was also praising the referees on their jobs throughout the playoff series, even though not even just in the San Antonio versus Oklahoma City games and not even just in the Oklahoma City games, but there was a lot of calls throughout the entire tournament where the calls were very questionable at best. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the best way I can put that. So I'm not entirely sure why he's praising the referees. The NFL is kind of addressing the referee problem on their side because they're bringing in a whole new team of referees next year. So that is going to be a very interesting element for sure. And part of the reason they did that was because a lot of the people were concerned, to say the least, that the games were rigged in favor of the Chiefs, because there was a lot of calls that would go Patrick Mahomes' way. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that I was one of those people. I think in some instances, yeah, like I think some of the calls definitely went the Chiefs' way, just like with any other team. Like sometimes the calls go their way, shouldn't have been a call that went their way, but it went their way anyway. And now the NFL is like, okay, we're going to switch up the referees and see how this goes. And I think that is a, proactive approach that I think a lot of people can appreciate. It also gives the other referees a little holiday. They get a little 1-year holiday. So they get a nice little vacation for a little bit. But yeah, greatest commissioner in sports, definitely not Adam Silver. I will say that much. Plain and simple. I'm not really sure there is a greatest commissioner in sports. I mean, it really kind of depends, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I just, with the NBA, part of the reason why I'm pretty against Adam Silver being called the greatest commissioner in all of sports is because of the flopping, the lack of enforcement, with all of that, with the flopping, not really paying any sort of attention to what Oklahoma City is doing and how they're taking advantage of the rules of basketball and making the game unethical. Like, if he actually cared about the sport of basketball, he would be proactively doing something about this. But I mean, you could also look back at the MVP ceremonies. The only one that Adam Silver really, I guess, had a positive interaction with was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander when he received both of his MVPs. And there's video evidence of that. There are people that have made video compilations online that show each MVP ceremony that Adam Silver has been a part of, where he presents the trophy and then he'll just back off and walk away and not do anything. But when he gives it to Shea, he's all like dapping him up, fist bumping him, giving him a hug, like, just being in the moment with Shea, but with the other players, no. Like, not even with Steph or LeBron or, like, other big name, like, other older big name athletes. Like, yeah, I mean, you would, like, some people have said that Steph and LeBron get favoritism, and I'd probably say less so now than before, but, or at least, by the referees. But, yeah, it's been very interesting for the NBA because especially ever since the cup, like the in-season cup that they have, like the in-season tournament, where they can get prize money to award to their team and all that. I don't normally tune in that deeply to the NBA at the beginning of the year just because there is college football, there's NFL, there's college basketball all going on at the same time, and the first in-season tournament just kind of almost falls onto the wayside just because of the other stuff that's going on. Like, I'd say November, December is a very chaotic time for sports just because there is so many things that are going on at the same time that are very relevant. So very hard to compete with, the end of college football season. Like, college football's going into their playoffs. NFL is kind of approaching their playoffs as well. They're in their last few games. College basketball is really starting up. The in-conference play is starting to like ramp up at that time. So NBA just, I think, struggles competing with all of that. So normally I tune into NBA kind of towards the last third of their season. Every once in a while, I'll kind of keep up with what's going on. If there's free agency stuff, I kind of look into that. But otherwise, not a lot of interaction with the NBA before the last third of the season. But yeah, just kind of going back to the Spurs versus Knicks. I said the Knicks were going to win in 7. I don't remember this Corgi's name, but this Corgi has an account. It's known for predicting outcomes of not just NBA games, but also NFL games, college football games, pretty much anything you can think of. The Corgi sits at the top of the stairs. It bounces a basketball off its nose. There's 2 trash cans at the or like garbage bins at the bottom of the stairs, and each of the garbage bins is labeled with one of the teams or with each of the teams, and the Corgi doesn't know which team is which bin, so he just makes it at random, and that's kind of how he predicts the outcomes of games. He predicted the Oklahoma City versus Spurs Western Conference Finals series exactly, game for game. And for the New York Knicks versus San Antonio, he predicted San Antonio to win in 7 games. So San Antonio has the Corgi on their side. But I still like the Knicks to win. Now, there is also this other thing that I saw online. Somebody made a shirt, just a little white t-shirt that had, I believe this started in 2012. I think that's when the shirt was made, and it was predicting the next 20 NBA playoff champions. And on that shirt, it actually predicts the Spurs to win it this year. And it's been right ever since 2012. Every single prediction on that shirt has been correct. So it's really looking like the Spurs kind of have some external forces on their side, some mystical force that is just kind of willing them across to the finish line. But New York also has some mystical forces kind of on their side as well. You look at Danhausen. He lifted the curse on New York. Ever since he lifted the curse on New York, they've been doing well. And they've been undefeated in the playoffs going into this championship series ever since playing Atlanta, where they gave up 2 games. So New York has only lost 2 games in every single series that they've played so far this playoffs. So going up like San Antonio is going up against a pretty robust New York Knicks team, while they themselves are also a fairly robust team as well. Like, this is going to be a really fun NBA Finals series to watch. I will be 100% tuned in for sure. I mean, last year I was tuned in as well just because the Pacers were there, and just watching what the Pacers and Halliburton were doing last year in the playoffs was just absolutely incredible. This year, you've got 2 relatively big market teams. New York is, I mean, obviously that's a big market team. San Antonio is kind of I'd say San Antonio is probably a mid-market team. Not necessarily a small market like Oklahoma City, but not necessarily, big like New York or Chicago or LA, right? Kind of in a happy middle ground there for San Antonio. But yeah, again, both these teams, young rosters. I think the Spurs roster overall is a little bit younger, probably by a year and a half on average, or at least for the average age, they're a year and a half younger. But it is going to be a really fun series to watch. Again, because of the new faces. I mean, this is part of the reason, like, that's the other reason why this feels so fresh. It's not just because Oklahoma City is not going to be there. We're going to get a new champion, one that we haven't seen in either 10, 12 years or 20 plus years when it comes to New York. So it's going to be really fresh. And the streak of new champions since 2020, I think actually this streak started back in 2018, but the streak of a new champion where it's not a repeat champion is going to live on because Oklahoma City lost. And this is something that I kind of like. And I actually think it is great for the NBA that they don't have a repeat champion yet, because there are so many new and young players that are kind of trying to make a name for themselves. Like Oklahoma City, they could be the next dynasty. San Antonio could be the next dynasty. New York could be the next dynasty possibly. And I mean, that's just 3 teams that I'm, popping off the dome. So I think it'll be very interesting for the future of the NBA to see kind of how all that plays out with the, while considering the fact that there's the whole tanking policy that is going to be put in place for future drafts. Okay, so speaking of tanking and free agency, there was a lot of free agent moves and trades that were made yesterday. And they were big moves. So the first one, the Giants I think re-sign is the right word. They re-sign Odell Beckham Jr. to a contract to play wide receiver. I believe it's a 1-year contract. It's a 1 or 2-year contract, but he's going to be back with the Giants, which is kind of crazy. I mean, it's been what, 10 years since Odell has been on the Giants. I think it's probably been 2 or 3 years since Odell Beckham Jr. has played wide receiver since retiring from football. I mean, it'll definitely be interesting to see him coming back. The Giants also signed Juju Smith-Schuster from the Chiefs, and they also signed Braxton Berrios. Both of those guys have a 1-year deal. So the Giants completely bolstered up their wide receiver room, and they already had a couple of decent receivers, but now they have a full staff, I guess. I mean, I don't really know how else to put it, but a full staff quality group of wide receivers at their disposal. So Jackson Dart is going to have a lot of weapons to throw to. They're not really going to have to rely solely on Cam Skattebo for the run game and also just the 1 to 2 receivers that they had prior. So, yeah, like they're not just going to have Malik Neighbors and Darius Slayton. And part of the reason why the Giants also picked these guys up was because Malik Neighbors has a knee injury and Darius Slayton has a core muscle injury, currently rehabbing those. So just having the extra depth at the wide receiver position, so that way they don't have an end of season collapse when they make it to the end of the season, I think is very crucial for the Giants. Another big signee, the Eagles trade A.J. Brown to the Patriots for 2 draft picks. They got a first-round draft pick for 2028, so that's 2 years from now, and they got a 2027 fifth-round pick. Now, I actually think this is a pretty great move by the Eagles because A.J. Brown has voiced his frustrations throughout last season about not getting enough catches, just not really feeling like he's being utilized the way he should be on the team. And it was kind of causing some friction within the locker room. And, you don't necessarily want to have to deal with the drama and the tension throughout the season like the Eagles did last year. But the Eagles also are known for drafting incredibly well. I mean, the Eagles drafted A.J. Brown a few years ago when he first came to the NFL. And that paid off. I mean, I believe it was his second year, A.J. Brown was one of the key players that helps the Eagles win the Super Bowl when they won it 2 years ago. So I think Eagles will be fine. I think this is a great move for the Eagles and also the Patriots. The Patriots have been needing more wide receiver depth for Drake May, their quarterback. So I think both sides won here. And also considering the fact that the Eagles and the Patriots, like the Eagles are in the NFC, Patriots are in the AFC, so it's not really going to sabotage themselves. Like some teams will, or at least, I don't know, I feel like a lot of teams were trading with their in-conference and just in-conference rivals, like Bengals and Ravens trading around, and I think Eagles and Cowboys were trading around a little bit during the draft. Just interconference trading can be a little ugly sometimes, especially if the fan base feels like one team got fleeced by the other. Like if a fan base feels like their team got fleeced, that could be a huge problem. So, but the reaction on both sides from what I've seen has been positive for both. So I think Eagles will be fine. They did get Mekhi Lemon in the draft. So that was they basically replaced A.J. Brown with Mekhi Lemon. So they also got Dontavion Wicks from the Green Bay Packers. And they also signed Hollywood Brown and Elijah Moore as free agents. So the Eagles have picked up some wide receiver depth in the draft and in the free agency. So I think Eagles, more than fine. They have a solid team, and their general manager is one of the best in the league. So I think Eagles are going to be more than well off, to say the least, going into next year. And then finally, probably one of the biggest ones, this might actually be the biggest one, to be completely honest, but Myles Garrett gets traded from the Browns to the Rams. The Rams are going all in on this Super Bowl run. But essentially, the Rams got Myles Garrett, and they traded away DeJared Verse, a 2027 first-round pick, 2028 second-round pick, and 2029 third-round pick. So kind of looking at this on face value, it looks kind of like the Browns fleeced the Rams a little bit. However, the Rams haven't really been great at drafting. So I'm not really confident that the Browns have really fleeced the Rams in any way. They did get a lot of draft capital, which they can absolutely trade away for other players from other teams. So I don't know. I mean, I definitely like the way the Rams came out of this a lot more than the Browns. Again, not even just from face value, but just picking up Myles Garrett. People are already talking about Sam Darnold coming out of retirement to play with Myles Garrett. I mean, hey, if OBJ can come out of retirement to play with the Giants, why can't Sam Darnold come out of retirement to play with the Rams? I mean, that would be absolutely insane. The Rams would be stacked into oblivion. They would be the most stacked team in the NFC. Not even NFC West, but just the NFC. Plain and simple. I mean, just having two defensive guys on that side of the ball like that would just be nasty. The Rams also traded a first, third, and fifth and sixth round pick to the Kansas City Chiefs for all-pro cornerback Trent McDuffie, who's one of the Chiefs' key defenders last year. So the Rams are really building up this defense. This is kind of looking like, a few years ago, I believe it was 2022, when the Rams won the Super Bowl in LA against the Bengals, where they had an all-star defense. And that's kind of the direction that NFL teams are kind of heading now. I mean, you look at the Seattle Seahawks last year. They had the Defensive Player of the Year. They had one of the best defenses maybe of all time. I mean, people were saying that the Legion of Boom is back in Seattle. So I think defense, if you build that up, if you build up an indestructible defense, you are going to go far to the Super Bowl. You're going to make it to the Super Bowl, most likely. Just looking at the teams that made it. I mean, you look at the Patriots. The Patriots had one of the best defenses last year, but it was not. Seattle was just overall, not just on defense, but also on offense, just built way better than the Patriots were. The Patriots on offense just didn't have enough to get past Seattle's defense, and that kind of led to Seattle blowing out the Patriots in the Super Bowl last year. Or this year. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But either way, absolute craziness in the free agency yesterday, and I'm sure, after the broadcast is over, there's going to be some other free agency moves that go down that are going to be just as crazy or crazier than the three that I just talked about just now. But before we go into the break, I just wanted to kind of, end the NFL talk on this note. I will say, this NFL season, I think just looking at it, is probably going to be more exciting than last year's NFL season. And last year's NFL season did turn out to be pretty exciting, but there was also a lot of injuries that were taking place that I think was kind of holding back the season. But looking at how these teams are now building up their depth, like they're not just picking up one player necessarily out of the free agency or in a trade. They're picking up multiple players in a specific position. I mean, you look at the Giants, they picked up three wide receivers, all of them were in free agency. You look at the Eagles, they picked up drafts. They drafted a good wide receiver. They picked up wide receivers in the free agency. And you look at the Rams. I mean, yeah, the Rams only got Myles Garrett, but there is the possibility that they could entice Sam Darnold to come back and play for the organization to bolster up that defense even more. So really exciting for the NFL going into next year. And, obviously we all hope that all the players are going to end up being healthy throughout the year because, we when the players are all healthy, they're ideally playing their best football. So with that being said, we're going to take a short break, and here's a message from our sponsor.
This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the enhanced games. Now, we did talk about it a little bit last week. That was kind of more of an immediate reaction to what was going on simply because the event had just concluded. There was a lot of reactions that were being put out online, and there was still some, but after the broadcast, there were still some responses that I was kind of waiting to hear before I decided whether or not I was going to talk about the enhanced games anymore, because I did say last week that it, at least viewership wise, it was kind of a flop. But here's why I'm going to kind of switch up a little bit on the enhanced games a little bit in terms of it being a one and done deal. And I'm also going to go into what I would do if I was the CEO of the enhanced games. At least, just making moves down the line, because I'm looking at this whole situation and I just think that there are so many different ways that the enhanced games could go. There's definitely some things that it can do better, in my opinion. And I am excited to kind of just list my arguments, because I'm feeling pretty confident about these arguments. But yeah, so enhanced games. The first part, here's the reason number one as to why I'm kind of shifting my stance a little bit on the enhanced games. So the president of the International Olympic Committee, she comes out with a little statement on the enhanced games, or maybe not necessarily the enhanced games, but on paying athletes. The IOC president is Christy Coventry, and here's what she had to say about paying athletes at the Olympic Games. She says, "I don't believe in paying athletes." Plain and simple. That's what she said. And, when I saw this, my immediate thought was, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you hate the Olympics? Do you hate what you do? Do you hate your job? What are you, it's just a terrible business decision. Why on earth would you say that after the enhanced games, only had, they had less than 2 million viewers total, or at least, less than 2 million viewers online. They had about 2,500 people watching the enhanced games in person, right? They didn't have a official, broadcaster. It wasn't on one of the major networks. And because of all that, the IOC and the Olympics, in my mind, had all kinds of leverage to just increase the pay a little bit. They could have increased the pay and the reward for the Olympic athletes just a little bit more. And that probably would have been enough to kind of just keep turning people away from the enhanced games. But no. Instead, she decides to double down or triple down, quadruple down, or however many times she's, gone down on this position. But what's going to end up happening is that quote is going to drive more people to participate in the enhanced games. Now, why? Why would I say that? Well, a lot of the athletes, here's the first reason. The athletes that participate in the Olympics have made known that it is difficult to afford, to live while also competing as an Olympic athlete. Even when you win at the Olympics, you don't really get that much money. I mean, it obviously kind of depends on which country you compete for, but generally, there is not a lot of money in competing for the Olympics. The one piece of leverage that the enhanced games has is what? Money. They have money. They're paying their athletes. But they're not just paying their athletes for getting first through fourth. They're also giving them supplements. They're giving them doctors. They're giving doctors for recovery, massage therapists, nutritionists. They're getting they're not just getting money, but they're also getting resources as well in addition to that money. And you look at the rules of the enhanced games. You don't have to be taking PEDs to be participating in the enhanced games. You look at some of the athletes that participated, that won. We talked about them last week. If you want to, go back and check out my thoughts on that a little bit more, it's on Spotify and other podcasting platforms. But the point is that those athletes not only competed in the enhanced games, but they won in their events at the enhanced games. So, because enhanced games doesn't discriminate between people that take PEDs and don't take PEDs, people that don't take PEDs that want to compete for more money are going to be driven to the enhanced games, because those clean athletes showed that you don't have to be taking the PEDs to get the money and to be successful in the enhanced games, or to compete in the enhanced games, rather. So I'm really intrigued as to how many people are going to go to the enhanced games. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 years down the road after the LA Olympics in America, if a lot more athletes, or at least a lot more American athletes, say, you know what? If this hasn't changed in 2 years, enhanced games keeps growing, we're going to go over there and compete as an enhanced athlete. Now, kind of going more into what I think the enhanced games can do better. One thing that kind of separates there's a couple of things that separate the enhanced games versus other organizations that are under the IOC. The first one is that the enhanced games competes once a year. Now, you look at some of the sports that the enhanced games has that, are under the IOC. Swimming. They have a world championships twice a year or once a year. The Olympics sometimes takes the place of the Olympics takes the place of the world championships. They also have the Pan Pac games. They have other international competitions besides, their main one, the Olympics. Enhanced games right now only has the enhanced games. So we only see these athletes compete once per year. Now, when they're not competing at the enhanced games, what are they doing? Well, they're training. They're, optimizing recovery. They're doing all these other things to prepare for just the singular enhanced games. You don't really see them racing. Now, obviously, they can, race at practice, but a lot of times we don't really get to see that. So if I was Maximilian, the CEO of Enhanced Games, and I was, and I'm looking at what these other organizations are doing, he kind of already did this with the promotion of the Enhanced Games last year, where Golkomev swam the 50 free and got the world record in a supersuit, and he was insanely big, and it sparked the debate. But what they need to do is they need to have more competitions. And you kind of look at it like social media. The more you post, the easier it is for people to see you, right? In swimming, the more you compete, the more used to racing you are. The more you do something, the better you get at it. And this for enhanced games can help in multiple ways, not just for exposure, but also for the issue that they had with the technical difficulties that they had on the broadcast. The more that they run these events, the more experience they're going to have running these broadcasts, which is going to make it easier for them to anticipate certain problems, like the clock not being synced properly, or the camera shots. Like they can come up with better camera angles that kind of separates them from the Olympics. They can make sure that the cameras are switching properly. There was a couple of times on the Enhanced Games broadcast where the cameras weren't really switching in an ideal way. It was not a clean, the transitions were not clean, which kind of makes the broadcast look pedestrian and amateurish. And you don't necessarily want that look if you're the CEO of the Enhanced Games. Obviously, that was the first one. So maybe they were like, okay, we're going to work out some of the bugs and stuff here. But again, like I said, the more you do something, the easier it is to do it in the future. The more you can, build upon it and make it better. So I think that would be my first thing for the Enhanced Games, is just, doing more events besides just having the main Enhanced Games and also just the one small promotional swim at the beginning. I think they need to have their athletes competing more. Second thing, again, kind of going into the Olympics, the more you broadcast, like kind of building off of the more you do it, the better you get at it. If you keep doing it and you keep generating viewership, getting kind of more in the 10 million viewership range, 20 million range, then a major broadcaster is going to be more enticed to pick you up. CBS Sports, Fox Sports, NBC, maybe. I mean, imagine, said this last week, but imagine if Enhanced Games was able to get NBC to pick them up, and NBC has been the primary broadcaster of the Olympics in America for basically since the start of time. Since the start of the Olympics, it feels like that NBC has been the primary broadcaster. Obviously, that's not entirely true. That's not really true, but for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been alive, the Olympics have been broadcasted in America with NBC. Second thing, since the IOC makes up not just swimming, not just running, and not just lifting, you can also expand your scope and demographic a little bit by figuring out ways to incorporate other sports. So you can incorporate other sports that are competing at the Olympics to keep growing your demographic. And not only that, this kind of leads into my third thing, but making it a multi-day event. Now, one of the big differences that I noticed between the Enhanced Games and between the Olympics, Enhanced Games was one day. It was one day. And that was it. The Olympics is a multi-week event. It is on all the time, all day, all night, all the time. Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics, it's on all the time. If you're able to make it a week-long event, a 2-week-long event, maybe even a month-long event, if you incorporate enough sports, you could even combine the sports. You can get summer sports and winter sports in one thing, in one event, and not just tap into the summer sports, but also the winter sports as well. I think you would expand your demographic enough to where you can generate a insane amount of viewership and not just get exposure for the, medications, to put it generously, that you're giving out, but also just the other sports and seeing how these sports can be enhanced, as you guys say. So I'd say those would be my big things, because you want to differentiate yourself from the Olympics. You don't necessarily want to do exactly what they're doing, but you want to kind of take the core of what they're doing and try to make it better, make it more watchable. You look at the College Swimming League, which is coming out in the fall. We haven't really seen how that's going to go, but it's been building hype online the past year. The team lineup for the College Swimming League has been set. So just to kind of give a little bit of a summary of what the college swimming league is. It's basically there's 12 teams in this league, and it's to help, make college swimming more of a year-round thing. College swimming normally kind of starts late fall, early winter, and then goes into the spring and ends in the spring. And there's a lot of meets that are kind of in the fall or there's meets in the fall, but they don't really hold a lot of weight, if you will. Like there's some important meets, like there's the midseason meet, but doesn't really hold that much weight. But with the college swimming league being at 12 teams, and these are 12 college teams that I guess signed to compete in this league, it's going to generate more viewership for the swimming, and it's going to be a completely different lineup for the way swimming works. Now, kind of going back to the enhanced games, if I'm enhanced games, I'm watching to see what college swimming league is doing. I'm going to see how they run their event, how they run their broadcast, what kind of angles they're taking for the swimmers. How can I make my broadcast and the enhanced games experience better? And how can I keep driving athletes over to compete for us rather than competing for, as an Olympic athlete? Because at the end of the day, I mean, this like enhanced games, I really don't think is something that is going to be going away. And it's not necessarily because of what the enhanced games did last week, because, and I mean, I said it last week, but it was kind of a flop. I mean, it was kind of on its last legs in my eyes and in a lot of other people's eyes. But because of the IOC president making the comment that she made, it gave enhanced games new life. And I'm, as more of a traditionalist, I'm a little bit more nervous as to what enhanced games is going to do. So I'm hoping that, I say what I say on here, and, people that are kind of on the other side where they're more traditionalists like me, and they see or they hear what I'm saying about the enhanced games and all these things that they can do to make it better, to keep driving athletes over to them, that it will hopefully force change. Will it? I don't know. Probably not. But I think there's definitely a lot that could absolutely be changed in the way that things are run. I think the primary issue with the IOC is that they just aren't paying athletes, and enhanced games is not even kind of, they're just straight up capitalizing on it, and they're almost mocking the IOC, to be completely frank. But yeah, kind of going back to the CSL, or College Swimming League, there's 15 events. There's there's one relay, which is a 200 free relay. The longest event is a 500 free. There's 200s of stroke, 100s of stroke, and 50 free, and 100 IM. So it's largely sprint events, relatively. I mean, you look at the 200 free and 500 free, those are arguably sprint events for distance swimmers. But yeah, I'm curious to see how the skins work. I do remember how skins worked for the ISL, which is the International Swimming League, where you'd have 8 swimmers competing in a heat in a 50, a free or breast or back or butterfly. And as the heat went on, half of it would be eliminated. So only the top 4 would move on to the second round of skins. The same athletes would compete. They'd get like a 3-minute cooldown. Then those 4 athletes would race against each other, and then only 2 athletes would remain, and then there'd be a 3 to 5 minute recovery, and then those 2 athletes would go at it. And if you won the skins, you'd get triple the amount of individual points, which would essentially be more valuable than a relay. Normally, a relay is double the amount of individual points that you can score at a swim meet. So again, enhanced games, maybe they go the one event route. Maybe they don't. Maybe they go for the multi-day event, multi-week event route. I'm very curious to see how exactly that's going to work because, I mean, if I'm the CEO, I'm definitely adding at least one or two more sports going into next year. And maybe that's something they're going to promote later on. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out on that for sure. But I think that is going to be something worth keeping an eye on because, again, the IOC is not paying their athletes. The athletes have talked about how they need money to, do what they need to do in order to live healthy enough to compete at the level that they want to compete in, and that their countries need them to compete in order to bring home the hardware. So, yeah, and it definitely also doesn't help with the state of the economy in the entire world right now. Everything is a lot less affordable than it has been in the past with, inflation and everything else going on. It makes it a lot harder, and that is indirectly adding tension to the whole enhanced games versus the IOC situation. So it's a very unique situation. It's definitely not something that I had anticipated to happen, at least before enhanced games came out. I didn't really think there was going to be something like that was going to happen, but yeah, then after enhanced games was over and I saw that only one world record is broken, I was like, okay, now it's definitely over. But then 1 to 2 days after last week's broadcast, the IOC president comes out and says, I don't believe in paying athletes. And that just completely flipped my whole take on the enhanced games on its head. And one last thing on the enhanced games also, that a lot of people, and I haven't even mentioned this, but a lot of people have been just kind of omitting, just because, when people were thinking about the enhanced games, they were thinking about world records being broken. But a lot of the athletes that were participating in the enhanced games were past their prime, or they just haven't raced in a while. And a lot of those athletes did get personal bests. There was a lot of personal bests that happened at the enhanced games. And that is why the CEO said that it was a success. That's why he was calling it a success. Now, obviously, as a viewer of the event, I didn't necessarily think it was a success because, they were saying that all the world records are going to get broken and, hoorah. Like, that's pretty much the route that enhanced games kind of went in terms of their marketing of the event. And on that front, I think that was a letdown. You also look at the viewership. Was not probably where I thought it was going to be, or where a lot of people thought it was going to be. So I think that plays a huge factor as well. So, yeah. I guess one last thing before we go, just going to talk a little bit more about the CSL, because the 12-team roster has been set, and there's a lot of big name schools on this roster. You've got Virginia, who has the 6-time women's national champions. Their men's team finished 9th last year. You've got IU, who had their men finish 3rd last year. Their women finished 7th. You've got Tennessee. Both their men's and women's teams finished 5th. Cal, their men's team finished 7th. Their women's team finished 4th. Stanford, their men's team got 10th. Women's team got 2nd. Michigan had their men with their 8th place men's team and 6th place women's team. NC State, 6th place for the men's, 9th place for the women's. Louisville, 12th place for the men's, 8th place for the women. Ohio State, 13th place for the men, 12th place for the women. Georgia, 15th place for both the men and the women. Alabama, 24th place for the men, 11th for the women. And Auburn, 17th place for the men and 25th place for the women. So a lot of top 25 teams from last year, at least in the NCAA national championship meet finish, are going to be competing in this CSL. So it is going to be a very fast fall season for sure, which I think will hopefully bring more excitement to the sport of swimming and not towards enhanced games. I'm hoping that, this goes well and the IOC and the Olympics kind of see how this goes and they're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we can apply some of what the CSL did to the Olympic Games to try to improve upon it and make it better, more entertaining. Like the skins, like if they were able to implement the skins, I think that would probably help them a lot. I don't necessarily know how they're going to do that because the swimming portion of the Olympics is already like 10 days long. It's already really long. So I don't really know how they're going to do that. But if they were to do it, they would find some way to do it. I'm not entirely sure how they do that, whether they cut some things. They are going to be doing 50s of stroke for the Olympic Games, which is a new thing in the next 2 years. So again, we'll see how it goes. They are also going to be they're going to be trying out 10 lanes for semifinals and finals for World Championships. I believe it was the meet that they were doing this summer where they were going to try that out at to expand the finals a little bit. So I think that will be interesting to see how that plays out as well. Because normally in the Olympics, there are 10 lanes, but only 8 of them are in use for the semifinals and for the finals. Those outer 2 lanes normally are not used. So, yeah. With that being said, that's all we got time for today. If you missed last week's broadcast, there was a lot of stuff that I referenced from last week's broadcast in this week's broadcast. If you want to go back and check that one out, it's on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Millions.co, and Patreon and other podcasting platforms. Pretty much any podcasting platform you can think of, it's there. I also have been starting to post more short-form content, reactionary videos. Those are on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Twitter, I go on there every once in a while to react or retweet certain things or certain stories. Sometimes I post reactions on Twitter. I'd say Twitter is the one I'm least active on. I'd say, if you're trying to see the short-form content, I would go to the Instagram, the TikTok, or the Facebook. That's kind of where most of my stuff is now, at least for the short form. And next week, we're going to be talking about NBA playoffs for sure. Cubs have been kind of on a downward spiral. We are going to need to talk about that at this point. Kind of crazy that they went from a 10-game win streak to I think it's a 13-game losing streak now. It's been a very up and down season for the Cubs for sure. If there's any more NFL free agency news, we're going to be talking about that. The Brennan Sorsby court case is also taking place, so we are going to be talking about the outcome of that. Texas Tech is fighting really hard to get Brennan Sorsby to stay on their roster and not be punished the entire season and his entire career for the gambling that he did, which there was a lot of gambling that took place. And NHL. The NHL playoffs are also going on as well, and we are going to need to talk about that as well. This Stanley Cup final, I believe, is very quickly approaching, so we are going to need to talk about that and any other sports news updates regarding the rules and regulations for college sports, as well as any other big news within college sports, whether it be transfer portal news, head coach firing news, all that. We're going to be talking about that next week in some form or fashion. And with that being said, I'll see you all next week. Slide out.